So, what are PAILs and rails? PAILs and rails are acronyms. They stand for Progressive Angular Isometric Loading and Regressive Angular Isometric Loading. And the acronyms and those words don't really matter as much as understanding the concept behind them. So PAILs and rails as a tool are how we gain access to more range in a joint. Every joint, every tissue in the body has a stretch tolerance. This is governed by the brain and controlled by the brain. You can think of the governor on a car speed limit, right? That a car could go to 160 miles an hour, but the way it's been designed with the built-in functions is that it won't let you go above 130, let's say. So PAILs and rails are how we gain access to those last little bits. So let's take a look at the wrist, for example, right? When I'm bending my wrist back this way, I'm generating a stretch through this underside of the tissue. So I might have a limit on how far I can stretch. But let's say I'm going to need more than that for whatever activity it is that I'm doing. Maybe I'm doing push-ups and I need more wrist extension. Well, PAILs and rails is going to be my go-to tool. So within PAILs and rails, the thing that distinguishes PAILs and rails from regular stretching and trying to stretch our way into further range is effort, is the amount of work and strength training that we put into training these end ranges to convince the brain to relax its governance and give up a little extra range that we can also control and have strength through. So within the example of the wrist, right, if I am trying to gain access to more range here, there are two things that we're distinguishing between. One is flexibility. Flexibility says, hey, I can push my wrist into this end range. Mobility says, hey, I can actively pull my own wrist into this end range. So not only do I need the give on this side of the tissue, I also need the control on this side of the tissue, on this side of the joint, to be able to pull and control that range of motion. So within PAILs and rails as a concept, what we're doing is we're doing a little bit of work on both sides of the joint so that we can gain access to more range and that we can gain control through those ranges and produce some force. So for my wrist, let's say that I only have this much flexibility and I want to get more. What I'm going to do is I'm going to find that stretch. I'm going to search and find a line of stretch under this underside of stuff, this side of the stuff. And I'm going to hold that stretch for 1.5 to 2 minutes. I'm going to breathe, I'm going to let it relax. I'm going to let the brain relax into that position. Then I'm going to do my PAILs. Okay, the PAILs portion comes first. PAILs, you can think PAILs pushing, right? The side that is progressing or opening up more. What I'm going to do is I'm going to push and contract this tissue. Now it's important to understand that we're not going to go anywhere. With PAILs and rails, we're producing force at our very end range, and so there's not going to be much movement that's happening. We're just going to get contraction on either side of the joint, but there's not going to be a whole lot of movement going on with PAILs and rails if we're truly in our end range. So that's the isometric part of this, that we're adding work. Isometric contraction or isometric work is a contraction that happens without producing any movement. So here I am, I've created a stretch for this underside of the joint. I'm going to fight and build some tension through the tissue that's being stretched, right? Making sure that it doesn't go anywhere, that I stay in that end range. I'll hold for a period of time, relax. Now I'm going to use this side of the stuff, the other side, to actively increase that stretch, to pull myself a little deeper into that range of motion. I'll work at that for a little bit, hold for a set period of time, and then relax, establish a new line of stretch on this underside of the tissue, wash, rinse, and repeat. So that is the PAILs and the rails, the idea that we are finding our end range stretch, creating tension through that tissue, relaxing, and then using the other side of the joint to pull ourselves deeper actively. Wash, rinse, repeat with frequency and consistency over time, and what we end up with is gaining more flexibility and strength and control through that joint.